All right. Next month is going to be a talk about indigo snakes by Javen Bowder, who works here at the U of A. He previously did some work with these animals, but he's also going to talk to us about some of the projects that he's doing here in southern Arizona as well. It's a pretty cool snake. Today we have Dennis Caldwell, and Dennis has been a member of the THS since early on. Not only is he a great conservationist, restorationist, he is a marvelous artist and a great advocate and communicator of the Southwest, really. And this image, along with his painting of Quito vaquito fishes, was presented to David Attenborough during the protests that were happening at Oregon Park National Monument when the first iterations of the border wall were starting in that part of the border. I won't say much more about Dennis, except I think most people here know who he is or have interacted with him. He's a wonderful person. I've known him since I was this tall. And let's welcome him up.
How much taller are you?
Oh, I'm this much taller. Either one.
Okay, well, thank you guys for coming out. Braving the rainstorm and all. Hope everybody stuck in any washes or anything like that trying to get here. It's been such a great monsoon season, not. And that's kind of gets to the base of what I'm going to be talking to you about. Can everybody hear me? In the far back corner? Okay. If I start to trail off, just signal, wave your hand or something. So yeah, it kind of gets to the bottom of what I'm promoting in Arizona and all over the place. Things are changing, and it's not very good for aquatic species that need water. This is just kind of a quick list of threatened and endangered aquatic species in our area, and it's growing all the time, but primarily due to the fact that, you know, we used to have some major rivers through this part of Arizona. The reason why Tucson is where it is because it was convergence of a bunch of major perennial streams that were coming together and creating a nice wet environment where you grow crops or you could hunt, and it was just a happy place to live. Today, some of those rivers are still there, like the San Pedro over here, but there are no, it's very poor habitat for native species. There's exotic species in there, and it makes it almost useless to a lot of the species that I've been working with most of my life trying to recover and just keep hanging on to life at the edge. One of the gems of our area is Cienega Creek, which I have here. It is the last place that I know of where you can still find the native species without the exotic species. I worked on a big project a few years back to get rid of the bullfrogs that were in there, and that was successful. So now it is a great habitat for those native species that aquatic species that live there. The animals I'm mostly working with when it comes to like building habitats, trying to create aquatic habitats, Mosquito fish is, or not mosquito fish, the Helitop minnow is my best friend. I mean, it's just an easy fish to work with. They can handle almost anything. They can live in just a few inches of water. They are excellent mosquito eaters. If you're building habitats, especially in town, you have to have some way to deal with mosquitoes, and these guys are really great for that. The males are black during breeding season. That's what we're seeing down there. He's courting his big female there. And then the other species that I do a lot of work with is the Sonoida pupfish. This is basically the same species that you'll find at Quito Spring at Orchid Pike National Monument. And this species is really running out of habitat. Doing well at Quito. There was a close call about the time they were building the border wall through there where they were losing water there. Some hard decisions were made to renovate the pond. It really upset a lot of people because it was pretty heavy-handed, but it was the only way to save that water. It was just soaking into the ground. There was a leak at the bottom of the pond, and they chose to salvage the fish, go in and do a major restoration of that site. And now it's holding water great. Which I brought a picture of it. It's starting to look beautiful. The plants are all coming back. And I think in the long run, everybody that was upset will be pacified. The right thing was done because the animals that live there are now safe. Not to be said for the ones just across the border in the tiny stretch of the Rio Cienega River where I do a lot of my work. Same species. It's a stream that is slowly disappearing, going the same way that all of our streams and rivers have gone. Santa Cruz once was a real river, and there was one day where somebody was standing there and went down there and realized there's no more fish left. It got too dry. It finally dried up completely. And we've been kind of watching the Rio Sonoida, thinking the same thing was going to happen. And it has persisted, or I should say the fish have persisted a lot longer than we had anticipated. We started doing work 20 years ago, salvaging fish from it because we didn't think they would survive the summer. And somehow they would magically turn up again every year when the rains came. And it's just amazing. We have no idea how they can tolerate those kinds of conditions when the water is that low. I'm sad to tell you that I just found out 20 minutes ago. Some of my colleagues were down at the river, and the fish are now extinct. The river dried up the first time completely, and now there are no more Rio Sonoida pupfish in the wild. We have captive populations where we've maintained them, but I doubt we'll ever be able to put them back into the river. Longfin bass is another species that I work with a lot, primarily because it's not as heavily protected. It's easier to get permits to put this into ponds. It's a native stream fish. They need running water to reproduce. So when you're building habitats for longfin bass, they have to have flowing water. Now for some herps, since this is the Tucson Herpological Society, this is the Cienega leopard frog, lowland leopard frog, Sonoran mud turtle. I also work with the Sonoida mud turtle down in the Rio Sonoida, which is probably still going to hang on because there's a new sewage treatment plant in the town of Sonoida in Mexico that releases water, and a lot of work has been done to get that species established in that reclaimed water from that sewage plant. This little guy, Choyo, I raised over winter because he was the size of a silver dollar when he was brought to me, and he is the first Sonora mud turtle to be introduced into the acequia at Mission Garden that I built a few years ago. That's the water feature that runs catty corner through the Mission Garden. Helitopino were introduced right away and have been thriving in that habitat. The snails also had gone crazy in there, and so we really wanted to have a turtle that could go in there and eat snails. And this guy's going to be happy enough, hopefully, to stay there his whole life. I don't know if it's a him or a her, but we're going to try to get a few individuals in there so we can have a full population. And then, not to forget plants. There's endangered species of aquatic plant too in Arizona. This is the Huachica water owl. Not much to look at. You would walk right past it. Once you learn how to find it, it's fun because it kind of comes and goes. It disappears for years and then it pops back up. Seems to like establishing new places because it doesn't really compete very well with other plants. So it's just been fun to watch this in the wild, especially at Cienega Creek, and see where it pops up and where it persists. We have been putting this into some of the habitats. You can see this growing in the Mission Garden as well, in the water feature there. Okay, so the problem, as we were talking about the Rio Sonoida, natural ecosystems are becoming dysfunctional. With climate change and invasive species and human encroachment, things just don't work the way they're supposed to. I hear a lot of people that are of this mind thought that, that we don't need parks, we just need to leave things alone and stop managing things, just let nature take its course. Unfortunately, by doing that, especially with aquatic species, they would soon be lost because people want that water, and there's advocates that are speaking up for leaving some water in the wild. And if not for that, people in charge would allocate every single drop of water for developments, people, golf courses, swimming pools, and the things that people want. I really loved an interview I saw on PBS, a roundtable discussion with some of the people from the water company and other water experts. And Chuck Huckleberry, the King County administrator, was at that table, and he interrupted at one point and said that somebody has to be an advocate for water for nature. We can't just allocate every single drop. And it just really was inspiring to hear somebody with his position and power to be advocating. So we need more leaders like him. Invasive species, every place, where you can. Well, I'll start with climate change. It's not going away. It's getting worse. We can see the projections. We're seeing extreme droughts like we've never seen, but we're also seeing that followed up by a really extreme flooding. We haven't had a crazy flood like what we're seeing in New Mexico, Texas, and North Carolina, but we will. And when you've got these droughts, what I'm seeing in places like along the rivers and wetlands, we're losing trees, we're losing things that help hold everything together because there's not enough water to keep them alive. And then a few years later, you get crazy flash floods coming through the system, and they're taking out those dead trees, and everything just starts unraveling. You end up with gravel flows, and it's a 1-2 punch thing that's just really depressing to watch happen. And I don't know how things are going to stabilize. I just don't expect a lot of our wild rivers and streams to be able to persist much into the future. Invasive species is another big one. Places where we do have water, Salt River, the Gila River, the San Pedro, the new heritage reach of the Santa Cruz River, where treated water is being released. All those places are getting inundated with invasive species. Some get there on their own, like bullfrogs. They're able to cross chunks of land that would boggle your mind to try and figure out how they got from point A to point B. But there's also things like fish where people just like to move them around. They've got pets and they put them in places. Fishing is a huge thing where there's water to fish. We have a game and fish department that specializes in making those places recreation spots for the public. Everybody loves to go fishing and everybody likes to find a pond or stream that nobody else knows about and put fish in there so that they can take their grandkids there and let them catch bluegill or something. So it's just something that is commonly done and it's just hard to stop that. We even have people spreading mosquito fish, which are the evil equivalent of our Keelotopino. They're really great at eating mosquitoes, but they're an invasive species that will eat frog eggs, they'll eat, I've seen them pick apart a leopard frog tadpole, just one little bite at a time, they just ganged up on it and just till it was a skeleton. But people are moving those around too because of mosquito issues. Nobody likes mosquitoes, and if they see water anywhere, they think, well, you know, I've got to dump some of those mosquito fish. They just assume the mosquitoes are coming from the water, but if there's already native species living there, those species are eating the mosquitoes, and we don't need the bad fish going in there to help them. That heritage reach of the Santa Cruz River now has spiny soft shells in there. It's an introduced species. It's very aggressive and it's kind of really threatening the chances of the Sonoran mud turtle population that was just beginning to come back in there and making us think that, you know, maybe it's going to be more of a challenge than we thought. They're hoping that that would be a natural, or the mud turtles would just come back on their own and be happy in that habitat. And now when you've got a big predator like this living in there, it becomes so much more complicated. Human encroachment. People love water, and you know, where you've got water, that's where people like to build their cities, their homes, their vacation homes. That's where they like to recreate. This is Slide Rock in Sedona. There's endangered species of garter snake that lives there, and it's not easy for some of these sensitive species to be able to tolerate this kind of recreation on this level.
I can't talk.
Solutions. So those are the problems. What I'm proposing and what I've found in my projects is that there are solutions to this, and some people will lean really heavy on the restore existing habitat. Restoring existing habitat is great, but it's not the only way. It's the best way, but maybe not the most successful in the face of climate change, where the existing habitat is drying up. There's only so much we can do. So I've been putting more emphasis. Yeah, restoration can be as simple as just fencing the cattle out of the stream. When you've got sensitive habitat, you can fence them out. There's erosion control things you can do to stop or slow down that water that's blowing everything out during these floods. We're bringing beaver back into Cienega Creek to see if we can help increase the creek's ability to actually hold water for bank storage, things like this. Beaver have been proven in other western streams to be able to help increase the amount of water that actually stays on the land, so it doesn't just flow straight through. Gives it a chance to soak in, support those trees, and then when it gets really dry, that water then starts oozing out of the banks and keeps some damp, muddy places where species can persist. So there are things like that that restoration can do. The drought is too bad. It's gone completely, and it's still probably a losing battle. Creating new habitat, on the other hand, is, I think, a viable option, maybe the only option. These pupfish and longfin dace from the Rio Sonoida now live in created habitat. They're extinct in the wild officially as of today. Here is a habitat. It's just a built habitat to be a replica of a tanaha. We did this for the Park Service out at their learning center. They needed a place where they could take the public and school groups to learn about tanahas. Tanahas are interesting, important water features that are all over our mountains, where you end up with these bedrock pools that even when the water stops flowing, they're solid enough to where they hold water like a big ball and can get a lot of species through until the rains come. So this was a interpretation of that, and we have some of those Rio Sonoida pupfish living in this habitat here in Tucson, and some lower leopard frogs. Could be as simple as a small backyard pond. I got into all of this because I was working with Sonora National Park to do just small ponds where we could keep lowland leopard frogs alive because they were drying up in the canyons above Sonora National Park on the east side. Carol's here today. She has one in her yard. And it's a pretty easy way to keep some of these critters alive. They did dry out of the Rincon Mountains and have they've been since reintroduced from some of these habitats. Now that the water has come back, if it keeps disappearing, we'll just play it by ear. But we don't have all our eggs in one basket. We've got it back. Schoolyard ponds are great educational opportunity. This was at Cienega High School with Mr. Aubrey's class, sitting back here in a tie-dye t-shirt right now. It was a beautiful habitat until bullfrogs got in, but it's a learning experience because you could try and talk to these kids and him till you're blue in the face, and they didn't understand that bullfrogs will show up. He's like, from where? And so I made him build a fence around it. And I told him that's not a good enough fence. It's like, oh, I think it's pretty good. And when the bullfrogs showed up, all of a sudden him and all the kids decided that bullfrogs are not so cool. And they spent a lot of time trapping them and getting rid of bullfrogs. And that's another teaching moment. You can tell kids that bullfrogs are really bad until they see a bullfrog show up in their own pond and eat all of the species that they put in there that they've been monitoring and taking care of. They don't villainize it until that happens. They learned and they grew up with that lesson. Here's a really simple ad hoc pond that we quick threw together about 20 years ago down in Sado and Rocky Point in order to back up that population of longfin dace and Rio Sonoida pupfish from the Rio Sonoida. The first time we thought it was going to dry up. That has since been renovated. We came up with some funding to redo this and make it a lot bigger, a lot better, and a lot deeper. And those fish are really happy. We moved the dace because they're stream fish. We needed a habitat that had more moving water. We moved them into a new pond that I built right next door to this one there in Rocky Point. And they went from maybe 10 individuals to now 600. So they're thriving. Unfortunately, we've been trying really, really hard to get them into the United States and running into just problem after problem with the Mexican authorities to be able to move. We just want to move 20 fish to the Desert Museum where they have a habitat that's been waiting for 20 years for these fish. And every time we think we're close, at the last minute, some Mexican official calls up and said that they forgot that we need this paperwork and that paperwork, and it all falls to pieces. So this came really close. Last year we had people lined up to do the transfer at the border, the whole thing. Then they shut the border down for a week, so we had to stall it for a week. During that week, somebody at the desk in Mexico realized, wait, we don't have that permit. And so we got the phone call and now we're still trying to get this through.
Which species of fish is that?
The longfin case, so that's the same.
Yeah.
It's just like the one we have here,
It's a nice-
only this is from this tiny river in Mexico. It has been isolated from all the Gila River Basin fish that we have here in Arizona ever since the volcanoes, the Pinacate lifted up the Ajo Mountains and separated all of that from the Colorado River. It had to make its way through the sand dunes and down, flows in down around Rocky Point and that estuary there. And so these guys have been isolated for a long, long time, and work is being done right now. I don't know if he's published yet, but it's definitely completely different than the species we have here. So I don't know if it's going to get its own name or what, but it's a special fish, and we really need to come up with a better way of backing them up. And that gets to the permitting issue. When I do these talks, I get a lot of people inspired and want to put something like this in their backyard, because if we all did this, they wouldn't be endangered anymore. We would have so many of them, we wouldn't know what to do with them. Unfortunately, that's a permitting nightmare for wildlife officials that have to oversee these species, especially these small, like backyard farms and stuff, because there's a lot of paperwork involved. The Game and Fish Department is accountable to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, if they even exist anymore. Back, I'm not even sure Endangered Species Act is going to exist anymore. So maybe all this will become real easy pretty soon. But for now, it's a nightmare. I deal with these people and they're understaffed, and they're trying to do that natural restoration and working with these species in the wild. So it's a real pain in their butt to have to be going to some school or somebody's backyard to check up on these fish because their pump broke and they're all starting to die. Now it's their responsibility to salvage those fish and frogs and move them to a safe habitat. And with a tiny pond, it can dry up almost overnight. So it becomes just a big pain in the butt for anybody that's like overseeing this and ultimately responsible for them. So I totally get it. I totally understand. It's just unfortunate. Site selection. So the first thing that we do when we're creating these habitats is we have to put a lot of thought into where these habitats are going to be. You might need connectivity for like leopard frogs. We think of them in meta populations where you've got multiple small populations scattered around the landscape. So if one of them dries up, they can just hop over into another one. We did projects like down by Cienega Creek where we converted cattle tanks, cow ponds into habitat to build a meta populations. Our main goal was we wanted to keep the frogs strong in the creek, but this built that population, made it much more resilient by having all these little habitats scattered around the creek. So if the creek dries up and then it rains and it gets water again, these guys just hop right back down in there and reestablish it. So site selection is really important. There's also you need access to water. These have to be drought proof. The reason of building them so that they won't dry up. So you have to have access to permanent water. That's usually hooking it up to city water or a well. Accessible for maintenance and monitoring. They're scattered all over a landscape. Somebody's got to drive out there and check on these things all the time if they're really remote areas. They won't get looked at enough. It's really nice if it can be like right at the headquarters of the National Park Service's Desert Learning Center, like that Tanaha I showed you, because they're there every day. They keep a really close eye on it. They troubleshoot it, make sure that it's good. But they can't be too accessible. to public, it's no fence or anything. People will sneak in and they'll release their red-eared slider turtles or goldfish or whatever. And then secure from invasive species. You don't want it to be someplace where there's a big bullfrog population at the Sweetwater wetland right next door or something that are gonna just invade it constantly. And then you're just not, you'll be fighting that battle a lot, or you have to deal with fencing. And then the other thing with these is design. You're gonna design for the species. You want it to be water thrifty. You want to make sure that you're not losing water. I use rubber liners in most of mine, so it's completely sealed up. Only water loss is primarily through evapotransport of water evaporating, which is significant in itself. When you've got trees around the side, they'll try to work their way over the edge of the liner and start stealing water from you and stuff like that. You're building for the targeted species, so you're designing for what species you're planning on putting into that habitat, of course. If it's long-fin dace, they have to have flowing stream water to reproduce and lay their eggs right in the current of the water. They make these little bowls in the sand and need to have that flowing water going across there. They're a stream fish, so they need more oxygen. Flowing water has more oxygen. Something like pupfish or top minnow, they can do fine at just about anything. I love working with these fish. I talk to people who work with salmon and stuff up north. You have to have water chillers to get the temperature just right. You have to maintain the pH. It's like these guys, you'll find them in these shallow puddles in the delta of the Colorado River where the temperature is almost too hot to put your finger in. And you know that dissolved oxygen's got to be practically zero. And they're just happy as can be. And leopard frogs, of course, can pretty much deal with just about anything as long as there's food around and they don't dry up. So they're pretty easy to design for also. Plants. And when you're designing, there's also aquatic plants that need to be in there. The plants help keep the water clarity good. They help oxygenate the water, and they add cover for the animals that are living in there. Plants are my biggest problem because aquatic plants tend to be very aggressive growers. They just grow and grow and grow. Cattails, for instance, and bulrush. They get pretty tall and they can grow all the way across the pond until there's no water left. That's how ponds work. Plants eventually take over small ponds and turn it into a meadow or marsh. And eventually that marsh gets so filled in with stuff that it turns into a meadow, and pretty soon there's no water anymore. It's just a nice, beautiful meadow. It's a succession thing. And these, we don't want to do that. We're trying to design them for open water. So I have to avoid certain species of aquatic native plants because of that reason. I've got chosen a few that work really good. They're easy to maintain, but I try to keep design also for maintenance, that it's easy to take care of these things, because if they get ignored or if they become a problem, whoever's in charge, then they just go downhill and they don't get taken care of.
No,
Pulling those plants is the biggest headache of people who take care of these ponds. They don't want to have to be pulling cattails. That's backbreaking work. Here's an example. This is Palo Verde High School. Working with them right now. They've got a beautiful concrete pond that was completely filled in with cattails. This is after weeks worth of work here on this side. This is more like what it looked like when I showed up. You can't tell if there's even a pond behind these people. We're starting at one end, just slowly cutting through roots, trying to remove stuff chunk at a time. And eventually we dried the whole thing up, and we'll be removing everything down to the bare concrete. The fish have all been salvaged and are in a holding facility. And they will be reintroduced once the work is all done. But yeah, it's a real headache, and I'm so happy the school decided to go down this path, because it would have been easy for them just to fill it in with dirt and say goodbye to it. But it's a really well-built habitat, and I don't know who built it, but this was done professionally with concrete and rebar, and it's gonna last for a long, long time once we get it cleaned up and the right plants in there. Funding for building new habitats is not easy either. They're expensive. Modest sized pond, done inexpensively is still gonna be, probably close to $10,000. It's hard to find that kind of money for conservation, and it's nice when that pot of money does show up. A lot of times we rely private property owners to put the bill for stuff when we're building some of these. And if they want it bad enough, they'll pay for it. But most of the time, we're just doing it by the seat of our pants, and we get enough money to pay for a liner and a pump and do what we can when it's an emergency situation. Conversion. So you can also take existing waters all over the landscape and in our cities and convert them to native species habitat to help protect endangered aquatic species. And there's all kinds of really great options out there with just a little bit of thinking outside the box. Out at Las Cienegas, we took the cattle ponds and we fenced out the cows. There's a windmill with a well located back in here. We put solar panels on that with funding from a grant we got from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And we'll run a pipe over here. Pipe flows into the frog and fish pond, overflows out here for the cattle. This is being renovated this year. We're going to deepen it, and we're going to put a bunch of cattle troughs, just metal cow, like horse troughs out here, so cows can drink out of those troughs. Then we don't even need to overflow out into there. It's kind of wasteful of water. Again, we want to be water thrifty everywhere we can. And so by having this just go into horse troughs for the cattle to drink out of, they get clean water. They're not, when they're drinking out of here, they're drinking their own piss and shit, because that's what cows do in a cow pond. And ranchers, the rancher that I work with, is like very keen on this, because the number one goal in ranching is to put as many pounds onto your cows as possible in the shortest amount of time. If they've got diarrhea the whole time, they're not putting weight on, and you have to be putting, giving them antibiotics. They get more money for antibiotic-free beef, and they get more money for the more pounds that are on those cows. So it just makes sense to have them drinking clean water out of these horse troughs. And so he's been all in on it, and it's just been amazing to work with him, because he always has an angle on this stuff that works with conservation. Swimming pools can be easily converted. I just saw where Beaver County is offering some sort of a rebate or something. Julia, do you know anything about that, or some sort of an incentive to like get rid of your swimming pool? I don't know if that means converting it to a pond. I think they want the water to go away. But having a pond, you're still probably using the same amount of water as a swimming pool. So forget I even brought that up. But yeah, some people get tired of chemicals, the chlorine. I worked on one of these here in town, and the woman loved it. She would go in there swimming. Once the plants get established, the water is clean enough. It's fun to go in there. The little fish would nibble on your freckles, and things like that. Some people pay big bucks to go like put their feet in these tanks with these fish. Get your toes exfoliated. This was for free. I could go over there anytime and help her pull cattails because she stupidly planted cattails in there. And then, just sometimes I just go on Google Earth and I just look around at all the water on landscape. This is a big mansion in Cave Creek. And I don't know what all this water is for or what their plans are for. But imagine if they decide that this is kind of a pain in the ass to keep koi alive in there because they don't really live in this environment very well. But we could put a whole bunch of helitop minnow in there and get some brownie points with the local public that we're doing conservation. And then they've got these other ponds right out here. They could listen to a chorus of leopard frogs every night as they're having their martini on the patio or playing tennis or whatever. I mean, if you can get somebody like this, a lot of times they don't even know what that could be. They've got the money to create it. They've got the money to maintain it, but they really don't even know about what the things you and I think about when it comes to aquatic habitat in Arizona. They just like being surrounded by water. They don't care whether it's goldfish in there or whether it's helitop minnow, whether it's bullfrogs or whether it's leopard frogs. Chances are they're gonna put the wrong thing in there. Same thing with golf courses. It's just an opportunity. It's water that's on the landscape. It's probably not going away anytime soon. And if it's isolated from problematic species, why not convert those into habitat? There's Audubon's been really big on this whole thing about greening of golf courses. This really started in Florida where they converted a lot of the water features to wetlands. Now there's alligators and egrets and great blue herons. And the golfers love it, see the extra wildlife on the course while they're out there. Maybe you don't want to go in and chase your ball with the alligators around, but they probably don't want to get wet anyway. There's the Tana Canyon right here in Tucson. They've got some beautiful water there. I did some Google Earthing recently and identified that it's really far away from the nearest bullfrog population. This place could be converted to leopard frog habitat. I don't think bullfrogs would find it. I don't think that there's bullfrogs in there. If they are, they could probably easily be gotten rid of. Anyway, it's just another one of those things. They have koi in there, and for those of you who don't know about water features, koi are like really big goldfish that everybody tends to want because they're showy and they're really expensive. But the problem with them is they're bottom feeders, they're a carp, and so they spend all day stirring up the bottom. That creates algae blooms. You can never keep the water clear in a koi lake or pond. It's just constantly blooming algae. They have to constantly treat it, filter it to try to make it look and not stink, look good and not stink. And if they would just get rid of the koi and put a bunch of helitop minnow, longfin bass, some gila chub in there, some pupfish, some leopard frogs, some mud turtles, the water would be crystal clear, and they wouldn't have to spend any money on them. And then there's these sewage treatment plants. This is Sweetwater wetland, beautiful habitat, great place for aquatic species. Unfortunately, being right on the Santa Cruz River, this particular wetland has a lot of invasive species that have gotten in there. But we're always building new treatment plants and coming up with ways to use that water. So there's hope that there can be habitats associated with them. Education is crucial with these things. Schoolyard habitats are ideal. You can set up curriculum for the schools, so they can have an outdoor learning experience for the kids. Any museum, botanical garden, golf course, resorts that have water, if they've got native species there, there should be signage to, nobody has to pay anybody to talk to them. There's just a sign that anybody can go up and read and learn about those species that are in there. It's a great way to just educate the public and outreach to the public about some of these issues and why water is so special where we live. It's not just for us to be able to build more homes. My favorite case study and point, I'm going to wrap this up with just a quick run through of this project. This is in the little Mexican town of Sonoita. It's the town just across the border from Lukeville, where you cross it to Mexico as you're heading to Rocky Point. That's where the Rio Sonoita flows through. The reason the town is there is because there was a river there with big cottonwood trees. And then the modern pump was invented and they started pumping groundwater for agriculture, and that all dried up until we got to this tiny little spot downstream from there, which just dried up today or recently. But this school, when we were trying to rescue fish 20 years ago, when it first started drying up, we started building ponds for these things to be kept alive in, basically refuge ponds. We did this with a shoestring budget. This high school, somebody, I don't even remember who, talked to one of the teachers there, and he thought it'd be a great project for their school. So we showed up, an ad hoc group of us, John Duncan from Fish and Wildlife Service, Ross Timmons from Arizona Game and Fish, and myself and a couple biologists from Tennessee. And we were inspired to try and save these fish so they didn't go extinct. And on our own dime, I should say on their dime, they talked me into coming along for beer. I got paid in beer. They covered the gas and everything. Yeah, so we built this first pond there, and we built one at a couple other sites down Sado, and then one at the Pinacate headquarters. So we would have some backup populations for these fish if the river did go dry that year. This one we wanted to have flowing water because at that time there was still a basin stream. We needed to have them in a better habitat with moving water. So this was designed to have some moving water for the dace. It worked out great. The school was really, really enthusiastic about this. I do a lot of school projects, and they often end up leaving me feel a little bit sad because they get neglected. The teacher you're working with retires and moves on, and then you don't have any other teacher that's going to hop in there and take that place and actually champion that habitat and that learning that those students have been doing. And so they often just kind of fade away, but this one was different. I don't know why, but somehow every time we went back, they were more and more excited about it and had done more and more with it. That whole little welded fence thing around the outside of the pond, they built this to keep the stray dogs from going in there. The dogs were like it too, or going swimming. Even though I tried to convince them that dogs aren't going to hurt the fish, they decided that they wanted to keep pupfish safe. We taught them how to trap the fish and do like regular monitoring of the population, so that we could get the data to be able to keep track of population, and developed a protocol so they could do it themselves. This is Doug Duncan when he was still working for Fish and Wildlife Service. This is Ross Timmons also. He was part of this. He was retired Fish and Wildlife Service. Big fish guy, knows more about fish than any of us will ever know. And so by developing a protocol, we taught them how to do all of this on their own as part of their class. And they kept track of these fish. We took groups down to the Rio Sonoita. This is basically what the river looks like during dry season. It's just a series of small puddles. It's the first time most of these kids, any of these kids, had seen pupfish in the wild. They never really believed us that there was a river somewhere down there. So they followed their own eyes. And this school is the only high school in Sonoita. it's a pretty large town, spread out, a lot of farms. So there's hundreds of kids that live in that area that all go through this one high school. Every single one of those kids learns about pupfish and the plight of the Rio Sonora River. We go back one year and there's a whole mural in their library by Genesis Blanches. There's little pupfish swimming around in here and over here. There's a mud turtle climbing up over here. Maybe it's a desert tortoise, lizard over here, a little scorpion on the rock. And we got cactus and everything back there. It's beautiful. We've got murals outside as well, by MMS, and they started a recycling program on campus. They built a pupfish where the kids could drop their discarded plastic items into here, and they would recycle them. They adopted the pupfish as their official mascot.
Excellent.
It's on all of their team jerseys for the baseball and everything. They even have a real live mascot. This is from their what's their 35-year reunion. They did the whole town came out for a big parade, and they did a celebration for 35-year anniversary of the school. And don't forget the baby pupfish. Where there's big pupfish, there's baby pupfish. Gotta get grade schoolers involved. And so as a reward, thanks to the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum, the National Park Service, and SADO. SADO was really inspirational in making all this happen and in getting the grant and everything. We came up with money to completely renovate that pond. It was getting old. It's like 20 years old now. And we wanted to just completely redo it, take advantage of every little bit of space we could get to make it bigger and deeper, to be able to get it to be an even better, prettier, more successful, and less maintenance pond than what it was when we first kind of just threw it together. It was a lot of work. The whole faculty and staff came out on their weekend to be the manpower to do all this. It was back-breaking work. We even found some herps. This was a Sonoran mud turtle that was living in there. Nobody knew it was in there. There's a little thread snake that was found as we were moving rocks around. I'd never seen a black one like that before. And then when we were all done, this is what it looked like. Of course, it looks a lot better now with all the plants. I don't have a current picture of it, but it now has a nice stream area coming out of the waterfall, flows down this stream, creates a current through these shallows. And then this whole end is really deep. So they've got a deep refuge and they've got a whole bunch of shallows to play around with. It really came out well, and we're really happy with it. And it was fun to reward the school for all their enthusiasm and hard work. When next morning when we re-released the pupfish back into the pond, we had all the local dignitaries coming out. This is our principal at Caldwell. She's been amazing. We've got the leader from the Auton Reservation there for this. The Mexican Fish and Wildlife Service people were there, the state wildlife officials, all the bigwigs from the town showed up. The mayor is in there someplace, and everybody was really excited to be part of this. And it's just, it's one of those few times where it's just really so rewarding to do a project like this. And with that, I'll wrap it up. Again, thanks to Sato in particular here in the bottom left. They have been an amazing partner. And then Oregon Pipe National Monument has been really good with their cross-border collaboration projects, and they were the ones that were able to help us get this grant along with the Desert Museum, both specializing or trying to put more emphasis on these cross-border conservation efforts. And this was like a really great. And that's all I've got, but I think we might have time for questions.
If an issue is chemical runoff on water golf courses, have you done several projects on courses?
No, I've not looked at that, but I have seen other fish in the golf courses. I know that things like largemouth bass and bluegill can survive in there. Our species probably are even more bulletproof to that sort of a thing. Dale?
Yes, I know you've got a number of ponds around Saguaro East for little leopard frogs. Have there been occasions to move frogs out of those ponds back into the park?
Yeah, so the question was, in case people on TV land can hear Dale back there, is I've got a number of ponds that I built near Saguaro National Park East, on the east side of Tucson, that were built to back up that lowland leopard frog population that lives in those canyons above the park. And they were drying up, and we were afraid we're going to lose those frogs. And the neighbors around there at an event where they learned about this, started volunteering their money in their backyards to have backup populations there. So many of the people from Tucson Herb Society were involved in building those ponds and making that happen. Those frogs, those ponds were invaded with bullfrogs for the most part. One of them has stayed clear of bullfrogs, has a fence around it. And then the ponds in a little bit different location, more towards Escalante Road, near the headquarters, don't seem to have any bullfrog issues. And though there's two ponds there that still have leopard frogs. And those frogs are currently being used to supplement a population that was just established in Fox Canyon, right there on Rincon, along the bottom of Rincon Ridge. That habitat came back and has been flowing. Park Service has been monitoring that, and it's been flowing for years now. So Don Swan made the decision to start doing reintroductions in there, and the frogs seem to be doing it really well. So it has come full circle. And I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that there are a lot of people like Don Swan at Sonora National Park who do a lot of great things behind the scenes. You know, the Park Service being hammered right now. And it's not just them, it's BLM, it's all land managers, wildlife managers, these agencies that are set up to take care of these resources are being gutted and disposed of. And I think the public doesn't really appreciate what happens behind the scenes. I work with a lot of these people, so I see it, but most people don't see it. They think that the national park ranger just basically shows people where the visitor center is and maybe fixes a trail once in a while and writes tickets. They don't realize that there's a whole inventory and monitoring program that happens in all of our national parks. We have to keep track of things like Saguaro National Park. They're responsible for making sure that that resource, the saguaro cactus, doesn't start just disappearing out of a park that was designated for saguaros. So they have to keep track of those. They monitor how many baby saguaros are coming up, how many old ones are dying, all this stuff, as well as the other plants and species that live there, tortoises, everything. They take care of these things by getting the data to back up scientific decisions to be made by land managers at the Park Service that have to try and keep everything safe and healthy. BLM's the same way, you know, people think it's just a bunch of public land where you can go take your rifle and shoot at things. But I work with a lot of people at BLM and National Conservation Area, Las Cienegas, that are dedicated to like vegetation surveys. There's grazing out there, yeah, but they do plot surveys several times a year to make sure it's not being overgrazed. As soon as there gets to be too much overgrazing, then it sets off a threshold. Ranger takes care of it, moves them somewhere else or whatever. But our goal is to never even let it hit that threshold. So we watch when it's even getting close. Then the ranger knows it's time to move to a different pasture. It works. There's all this stuff happening behind the scenes, and that's what makes it. And these people, we're losing. Anyway, I just had to say my 2 cents about that because the public needs to hear this for us. These are people who are not good about promoting themselves. They work with plants and animals and stuff. They don't go in front of the public and say, look at all the great things I'm doing. But they're doing great things. Wait.
Everything you've told us has been inspiring me as I've been listening. And you started with all those people at that one stream that were mobbing the whole thing. And then you wind up with this, where groups of people are actually getting engaged. And what I'm running through my head is situations like Bat Conservation International that exists today, because one guy got into presenting people and putting him into the context of bats, taking him under bridges when bats are flying out and coming back. And it reminds me of taking people on the Great Barrier Reef on tours. And there were 3 ways to go into the Great Barrier Reef. You didn't just sit on the boat and look at it. No, you could put on scuba stuff, or you could put on goggles and a snorkel, or you could go in a little boat thing they had that you walk down some stairs and there were windows on it. And you could see the Great Barrier Reef there. So it was adjusted for people to become engaged below water. And that's what it's hard to do in these things. So I'm thinking, you know, all of those shipping boxes that come across the oceans that they were lining up and lost across our border. If you got some of those and rubberize the outside of it a little bit and put a couple windows in it and put it next to an aquatic environment like this, you could have some, and it's open on the top. People could just walk down some staircases and look underwater at what's going on in the creek and engage the environment that we're trying to save in a way that they don't usually have a way to do that. But that just occurred to me listening to you. I never thought of that in my life before.
So Wade's question was that
How do you do it?
that, you know, just to reinforce that, you know, a lot of times I'll have school kids helping me build these things,
Yeah.
working with me. And I always run them through an exercise of, you know, what could be done better? I mean, what would make you care about these fish? And like one student like said, you know, I go to these places where they're protecting native fish, and you look in the water and there's these little brown things moving around.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get excited about that. He said, you know, what would happen if we had a window viewing area down below where you could go underwater and see them? You know, we've got that stuff at the Desert Museum. And that's great. In fact, there's places like, I think on Boulder Creek in Boulder, Colorado. I think they've got a viewing observation thing in the creek where you can go underwater and see the trout swimming around and stuff. Yeah, that stuff takes big bucks. Aquariums don't cost much, but somebody has to manage it. I do have an aquarium that I set up at the Desert Learning Center at the end of Broadway. So kids do get to go in there and see them up close. But we started to figure out if we could do that at Orchid Pipe National Monument, because we thought that that would be a great place in their museum area to have an exhibit, pupfish where you go in there and see them up close. But they have such a high turnover rate of staff there. Somebody's got to know how to take care of an aquarium. It's not easy, self-controlled, the staff turnover and, holiday leave and stuff like that. It just wasn't gonna work. So we're thinking maybe we'll set up a big screen TV with just a video recording or a live cam from in their visitor pond, with the fish that are in there. Pupfish are really fun. They're always moving around, chasing each other, flashing their bright blue colors and everything. And it would just be really fun to have something like that. It would be no maintenance, just a big screen TV plugged in, sound off, and running in a loop all day long until they leave for the day and they unplug it. So that is kind of my fix.
Well, as you pointed out, Cienega Creek, it's phenomenal, like right habitat, 40 minutes out of Tucson. I've been running cameras for years for Las Cienegas in King County, and it is an incredible wildlife corridor. What's going to happen when the hydro mine goes up? What's that going to do to that watershed? It's going to affect Cienega. That's a jewel. You can see it well.
The question is, what's going to happen to Cienega Creek, one of our last place in this area that still has full suite of native aquatic species and other wildlife as well. If the Rosemont mine goes in, which they're still trying to get through, and now there's even less guardrails on them doing that. The short answer is that it will definitely be effective hydrologically. It's a long time span for that, those underground water effects to actually start impacting creek. Problem is, we're already watching the well monitoring and BLM hydrologists are out there all the time monitoring groundwater stuff behind the scenes, and nobody even knows they're doing, and they're logging all this stuff and keeping track so that they can look for emergencies before they become emergencies. And we're seeing a downward trend of groundwater, which expresses itself as surface water once you get to the bottom of the valley. And that's one of the reasons that we're bringing in beaver and doing erosion control efforts, things like that, that can just, on the whole landscape, the whole watershed, that can kind of help squeeze every little drop that we can out of what's available from the environment, and keep it in place. Don't know if we'll be able to stop the mine, but I'm not sure that groundwater is going to persist with the way these droughts are anyway. That's why built once. I mean, really, for my project out there, we tried to build this metapopulation of ponds, cow ponds, for so leopard frogs could reestablish, Cienega leopard frog could reestablish Cienega Creek, because they were completely wiped out by bullfrogs and disease. And we thought they would just be a temporary thing. We didn't put a whole lot of work into them because we wanted to just meet that criteria for our grant. We want to reestablish that population in the creek. And now, as we've moved forward and are seeing what's happening, we're seeing this all over the world. We're all realizing that we're way ahead of our time to have created these habitats as backups in a conservation area, and that other conservation areas are now asking us questions, how they can do a similar thing, because they're worried about their groundwater dropping and dropping and dropping. What's going to happen with their creeks, their springs? Do you just let it go, or do you create these backup man-made things somebody has to take care of forever? Because they won't take care of themselves like they can.
With those man-made structures, cattle pond conversions, have you seen any change with, or has there been evidence of like chytrid becoming more prevalent or less prevalent than like the natural Cienega?
So the question was about chytrid, which is disease that affects global amphibian declines all across the globe. And it's been responsible for the extinction of a lot of amphibian species. And here in Arizona, our leopard frogs are not safe from that either. They are affected pretty severely by it. Unfortunately, bullfrogs are not. They carry it, they spread it, but they have a resistance to it. So that's another one of the evil downsides to bullfrogs. But in our man-made habitats, what we're seeing is chytrid is a fungus, right? So it's producing spores primarily during cold season when the frogs are stressed in cold season. Those spores attack their skin cells and make it difficult for them to breathe, and they usually die. Tadpoles do not. So the ponds are affected worse than the creek because it's just water that's just contained in a pond. So those spores are just floating everywhere in that water. In a stream, the water, there's fresh water coming out of springs and from underground, constantly flushing those spores away. And we find frogs survive right at the spring source. When water's coming out of the ground, you'll get a group of frogs that will overwinter and survive, adult frogs. Whereas at the ponds, we pretty much lose all of the adult frogs. And then in the spring, you've got a couple hundred, couple thousand tadpoles that have now turned into baby frogs. And you've got a whole population again. So it turns into an annual population. So it still works and they're still surviving. It's not ideal, but that's the good thing about a cow pond as opposed to the stream. We know in the cow ponds, those tadpoles will survive the winter. In the stream, there could be a flash flood, these catastrophic things like we've seen happen in other states. Could happen if it's a winter storm. We lose all tadpoles, and then all the adults already died from disease, and then we're down to zero. In the cow ponds, they're protected from flood, they're protected from drought. So we've got these reserves, whereas a wild system with this climate is just really flashy, unpredictable. Carol.
I wanted to thank you for all the help you've given me with my backyard pond. From THS. And I was wondering if anybody here has any ideas how to discourage javelina.
Well, I'm curious, what kind of fence are you using to
No
keep
fence.
bullfrogs? Okay, well, if you can keep bullfrogs out with a fence, can you keep javelinas
yeah,
out with
but I
that
don't.
same fence? You don't want a fence?
You don't want to look at an ugly fence.
You're not.
Big dogs might. do
Big
it.
dog.
So the question was, the desert areas around town, Carol has a pond in her yard, and the javelina are constantly trying, especially in this weather that we've been having. They want to go in there and lay in that pond. These are just a small pond. It's just perfect size, like a javelina bathtub jacuzzi. And they want to go in there and they want to just hang out for the whole day, which isn't gonna hurt the frogs or the fish, except it could hurt the rubber liner that's underneath. So we worry about that liner getting punched from those sharp hooves or tusks chewing on it. So what we have tried to do to mitigate that is we put a lot of large rocks. We're going to get more. They need to be like football size, so they can't be moved so easy. And just completely cobble the bottom of those shallow areas so that nobody wants to lay down on a bunch of cobble. They want to lay down in a nice soft bed of mud. So if we can keep it really uncomfortable for them, they'll stay out.
Hostile
In the spot.
Other than that, fences are ugly. Nobody wants to do that. The electric fence is still an option though. It's just a single strand of wire on just a few small posts about this high. They come up and they catch it with their wet nose and they get a zap. And they don't go back near it. Anybody else? Somebody back here? I just kind of wanted to add to like what you guys were talking about earlier, trying to get more people in the public interested. You mentioned like using cameras. So I heard a couple of talks recently from a group out of Cal Poly that had a lot of success using that method, live streaming rattlesnakes. So I don't know if maybe there was a way we could do something similar at one of these sites. Absolutely. We've played around with the idea a lot of live streaming. Even just, having a link, for like an organ pipe from the camera to the monitor that's in the gift shop / museum there, so that people could see without going out in the heat. Sometimes it's just brutally hot there at Organ Pipe. And during the summer, the honeybees come in there and are all around the edge of the pond. So a lot of the public doesn't even want to walk out that door to go look at the fish. But if they could have a little live stream camera going, that would be the next best thing.
Big play on words with live stream.
Close to dead stream.
That's true.
Anybody else?
I'd like to say the evening news today had a bit on the Gila monster and its role in this GLP-1 situation. And they did a pretty good job with it, which is really very pleasing. I was there when that occurred, actually, in Dr. Posano's laboratory. And I remember that forever.
What year was it?
Lord. 79 or 80. That was back in Washington, actually a few days before we came out to live in Portland for 10 years.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you for having me.
I think so.
Caldwell.
How about it?